Hey, folks, and welcome back to the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where and why we are leaking women from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and how we can actually get women back. And we've been talking with a lot of women, almost 50 women this week, from many different areas of water who have had many different experiences. And one of the really important aspects of water is not just STEM, but also looking at the policy side. And we're excited to have here today as our in this session as our guest is Erica Brown, who is with the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, the largest. It's the association that represents the largest utilities that are public and not private. I'll let you explain what AMWA is, and then what you do at AMWA in that policy realm.
Sure. AMWA is an organization of, as you said, Kat, the largest publicly owned drinking water utilities. And we serve in advocacy and also utility management programs, sort of the C-suite of those public utilities. So the general managers, the CEOs, and their CFO, their chief strategy people, their chief policy people, with advocacy work on Capitol Hill and with EPA, and then also just trying to leverage the network of all those great minds and leaders in water. That's our tagline. Trying to leverage leaders in water to help them be better leaders, to have more sustainable, resilient utilities. And so the network is a huge part of that. And some of the programs we do, roundtables, webinars, information sharing is a big part of that. So I oversee our policy shop on the federal agency side, and also work on strategy. And I mean, we have a great team, a lot of women on the team. And yeah, I've been doing it for almost 20 years and I love it.
Although you do now have used to have a woman head of the executive director, and now you've got a new guy. Was he COVID hired? Is he just now getting to meet everybody in person?
No, he started in June of 2022. And yeah, Diane Vandehei, our CEO, was really the first. She was the first CEO for AMWA. She ran the organization almost as long as it was in existence. AMWA's been around about 40 years, and I believe she ran it for 37 of those years. So she was definitely a trailblazer, in the 80s, before there were a lot of women in water. And even this week, as we were talking about before you hit record, Kat, there was our Water Policy Conference, and International Women's Day happened, and we had a picture taken of all the women there. And, I'd say about a third of the people in the room were women, which was great. I mean, 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case for sure. So it's been good. More women are leading water utilities than were 10 years ago, which is wonderful. And more men and women of color, and which is also fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I got started on this whole women in water thing. Well, the first time we were talking about, the first time I had connected with AMWA was when I first moved back to DC, and it was I'd worked my way up as far as I could go to become the first woman eligible to become an associate in the water engineering division of a global firm. That there were some boys that didn't want girls in the club. And it was like, okay, what's next? And I was going to go head up a water education foundation out west. And people were like, oh, you know what? You're doing this great work. I was on the National Academy of Sciences study committee on aquifer storage recovery, which people hadn't really heard of it then. Now it's all over the news. I had done a lot of the work, especially on the regulatory side and the policy side. In fact, I had organized my very first contract when I came back to DC and hung my shingle with all these promises for all these guys. Yeah, go help us with this problem and we'll give you lots of work. Was to organize for National Academy of Sciences a full day program on policy planning, permitting, and public perception. Because that was the findings of the study. The science and engineering was figured out a long time ago. But the reason what happened, as it happened in North Carolina when I was with their state agency, every time it was a first time anyone in our state has done X, and you can substitute reuse, you can substitute, pick your poison, pick your, innovation. If it's the first time someone's permitting in a state, you might get the folks at the regulatory agency. I don't know, these these green spaces in place of treatment. I don't know about this, that, and the other thing. Is it going to work? Which never been done before. They're very conservative in the regulatory agencies, right? And in that case in particular, underground injection control under the Safe Drinking Water Act was treating all injection as waste disposal. And we had to change, which ultimately was the result after doing that study. But part of that was I went around to each and every one of the big utility or the big associations. I mean, the utility ones and the groundwater ones and the water management ones, and this one and that one. And everybody, we were talking to everybody about the findings of the study, and AMWA was one of those. So that's very good.
Yeah. Certainly having aquifer storage and recovery as a way that we can augment our water supplies is really important. So yeah, I remember that when you called AMWA. So that's great. Just so many more agencies are doing that now, just because they have to, and because I guess it's easier to do. So yeah.
And so doing briefings at utility, and then kind of switched to when it was apparent that I wasn't going to really grow that practice. And yet I saw this, there was so much conversation. This is around 2008, 2010. There was so much conversation about, everyone's going digital, and how do we go digital and all this, and how do we how do we communicate better? Right now, all this money that's coming out of Congress for water, that didn't happen overnight. That came from well over a decade of rethinking how we communicate water to policymakers, to the public, to the media. And that's where Water Citizen Media came out of initially. And so one of the organizations, the first places that I went as a water reporter, the water mobile journalist, be in the know with the Wawa Mojo, was and none of the utility heads would talk to me because they didn't have their communications director there. But there were two young women. One was head of a small utility, Laura from New Jersey. I'm blanking on her last name now. And the other was kind of a working her way up future leader woman in Houston by the name of Forrest, which was apparently a media interview. We talked about their experiences being women working their way up to leadership in the water space.
That's neat. That's really neat. Yeah, Yvonne Forrest is now AMWA's vice president. So, the head of Houston Public Works. So not Public Works, head of the water utility at Houston. So, under the Public Works director, but still a big thing.
We also were talking before we started recording about the fact that, I started looking into women in leadership. And I never thought I was going to get into women's stuff. It's like, I was an engineer. I was going to get all the right degrees, all the right certifications. I was going to spend my life doing planning projects and multi-criterion decision analysis and policies work and everything. Just these issues kept coming up. And I ended up, but a lot of people didn't want to talk about it in the associations, right? There was a lot of we're scientists and engineers. We don't see race. We don't see gender. It's a scientist is a scientist. It's kind of like that scene in Hidden Figures, where you've got the one woman mathematician, and she comes in late because she's, a Black woman who's had to walk half a mile to get to the bathroom. And it's like nobody even was conscious of the fact that there wasn't a bathroom in the building for her. And I think, there was sort of this pressure in the associations often to not talk about the bad stuff. Let's focus on the celebrations and success stories, but let's not talk about the real stuff. And that's why we wanted to get real here. It wasn't about having some kind of a bitch fest about, this guy harassed me, blah, 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 blah. This guy called me sweetie, I'm going to sue you. It's the things that actually affect whether you can advance in your career. I mean, you can kind of kind of get a thick skin or let it kind of roll off you only so many times. But if it affects whether you get a promotion or not, if it affects whether you get assigned to a project or not, or if somebody publishes your work under their own name, some of these are the kinds of things that affect whether we have women in leadership. Not just about let's get more young people from the pipeline. What are the issues that are affecting us, and how can the associations help ensure that it's not just retention? It's like, oh, how do we lock the door and keep these women from leaving our utility? It's how do we both develop them as leaders and get real about some of the things that are getting in the way. It's not just fix the women and teach them leadership skills, right?
Sure. I mean, I think it's, finding advocates, right? I think most of us probably have stories of situations that weren't very positive, the ones that you mentioned, but I think we also hopefully can find advocates, right? I love Mr. Rogers, who says, look for the helpers, right? And so stick with the people who want to help you and who want to lift you up. And yeah, that's something that I found really positive is, Kathy Bailey, who we know, director of Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, says, when they go low, you go high. So I think just always trying to, as you said, I'm not suggesting, as you say, like pretending things don't happen, but trying to, acknowledge those things, I think in safe spaces with other women is really important. And then, with other people who can be advocates, who can sort of daylight things that might be happening persistently or consistently in places of work, but finding those advocates who will step up for women, in that company or in the sector, I think is super important. And I've been grateful and blessed. I think that's probably why I'm at AMWA, because I've had, I have been for so long, because I've had advocates for me, in Diane and Tom now, who's our CEO, and our members, just people who I feel like, just saw the work that I'm able to do, as well as people on our team are able to do, and then just push that forward, and then if someone wasn't positive, I guess just stay away from them. But I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but yeah.
In political arenas, especially, may be that you have to work with people who are not so pleasant to work with. And
Sure.
When I started the looking at women in water leadership, it was an assignment for when I was in journalism school and starting Water Citizen Media, that you need to like do a more researched article and have data analysis and all that kind of stuff. And I went first to this big conference that Pat Mulroy at Las Vegas had on conservation, and I was listening to all the things that she likes talking about, and water energy nexus, what that was new, and is water local, and so in between sessions, I said, hey, you and I are both going to be at this conference in Milwaukee. She was going to be the keynote speaker there. And I'd really love to interview you. She's like, great, you got it. So I get to Milwaukee and she gives a keynote speech. And then as soon as she gets off the stage, she grabs me and pulled me out of her head. Let's do an interview. So we sat there and it was like a Barbara Walters interview, 45 minutes. And so I went through all the things that I knew she liked talking about. And then I asked her a question. In all the years with ASR, Las Vegas is big, right? So I'd seen her at a lot of conferences and Western water issues when I was in Colorado. And I never heard her talk about being a woman. And I asked her that question. And I think it was the first day. After that, occasionally she'd address it from the podium, but she never really talked about it. And I think, as I talked to, and she was president of AMWA at the time, could only come up with like 4 or 5 other women who were heads of utilities. Of course, she's only dealing with the largest utilities. We talked to Jackie Gerald at Water Environment Federation. That's, for the overall organization, everybody, that's a large organization. This is a very small, focused organization. And so I got together with some of the folks at AMWA who helped me come up with a whole measles map of, some of the smaller mid-sized utilities that had women or had previous women leaders, and over the years have interviewed many experts of women water leaders. And and I forget where I was going with that. I mean,
you mentioned Pat. It's true. I think different generations have different experiences, right? And so you and I can, I think, stand on the shoulders of the women who came before us, because they've kind of paved the way a little more, right? Cracked into a little more of that glass ceiling that people talk about. And so I think, I don't know, my mom's just similar, right? Yeah, these things happen, but she doesn't really talk about them. And because I think part of that is the culture at the time and the generation at the time. Now it's, let's talk about it. Let's get it out in the open. Let's walk through why this is happening. And I think that's great. But I feel like maybe that wasn't really so much part of what you could or what you should do, right? And I think women there's more of us, right, in the workforce than there were 20, 30 years ago when Pat or Diane got started, right? But also, hopefully there's not an echo. I hear an echo. It might just be me.
Sorry, that was my little reminder at 2:00, but we're good.
Oh, okay. Now I lost my train of thought, but I think, it's just, it's interesting, it's evolving. And even just thinking of, I have a teenage daughter, and thinking of the things that she's very self-aware of that I was not aware of when I was 15, right? I don't know, misogyny and patriarchy and things like that. I mean, I had no really concept of what that was when I was in high school, I don't think, and so I just think there's a lot more conversation about these things, and a lot more, it's okay to talk about it more. And plus the kids and, even people in their 20s, we have LinkedIn, we have all these things on social media where people are having fora where they're talking about, International Women's Day and just things that have been around for a while. But I think because of social media, we're so much more aware of it. And that's a good thing, I think.
We're starting to see that in the water space also, well, especially since the start of COVID. But even a little before COVID was the Me Too movement, right? Me Too. Obviously, Me Too started even earlier than that, but when it really became in the public awareness was around Harvey Weinstein, and that was just 5 years ago. Can you believe that was only 5 years ago? It was 5 years ago, and certainly a lot of the associations grabbing every woman they could get, and throwing them on stage. I mean, it was really just, quite blatant. And it's like, we support women, but I think what I'd started with Pat is that in that generation we had a lot of the women that were getting into leadership came from non-engineering roles, finance, of government relations, for example. And it was still a time when it was primarily, the head of your city water utility was the city engineer. The head of your state water agency was the state engineer. And, there was that lock of engineering. You had to be an engineer. And that's why I went back to school for engineering, was because if I wanted to be a leader, I had to be an engineer. And yet now I think some of that has also shifted. And I think maybe that is one of the reasons why we are seeing more women, just because we're getting more women like Yvonne Forrest who have engineering degrees, but also because, and many others, and that whole generation, a lot of them are themselves engineers, right? And, but we're also starting to see more utilities that are saying, hey, we got to come up with, new bond referendums to pay for all this new infrastructure. We need someone who knows finance. Hey, we've got some equity issues. We've got some, political issues. We've got some, community outreach issues. We need someone who knows people. We need a public administrator, an MPA. We talked to Beverly Marshall, who is an MPA. And so there's also two sides. It's the shifts of more women getting engineering degrees, but we're also seeing more utilities willing to have someone who's not an engineer and all the skills around the people skills, right?
Yeah.
I mean, have
Yeah,
you
that's
seen
true.
that?
That's true. I mean, I think, yes, I think that, Manny Teodoro spoke at our, meeting about, well, a lot of things, but one of the things that he mentioned was a talk that he gave 10 years ago about like, what do the leaders of utilities look like? What will they look like in 10 years? And so, he pulled those slides and he said, oh, is my prediction right? And it was, more women as leading utilities, more people who weren't necessarily engineers. And he didn't say this, but I remember because I was at his talk 10 years ago. There's more attorneys, there's more scientists. There's more accountants. And the leader of Northern Kentucky Water, is a woman and an accountant. And yeah, and I'm just thinking through some of the women who were at AMWA's meeting who run water utilities, and a lot of them are engineers actually, but there's an accountant, there might be an attorney in there. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. I mean, there's various skill sets, I think, right? And also I think it depends on if the position is political or not political. In some ways that might, like you said, coming through public administration or not. So
Right.
you need a lot more skill sets too now, I think, as a water utility manager that you did, right? Because you have to think about these issues of DEI more than you did 30 years ago, and these issues of affordability, and water utilities are becoming more adept at speaking to the public and engaging the public in their decision making. And so engineers, but also people who can put a good team around them. I think even if they're not an engineer, needing a good team is, feel like we were talking about earlier, right? You need a good CFO, you need a good PR person, you need a good scientist, you need somebody who thinks about strategy, you need somebody who thinks about DEI, and one person can't do all those things well, right? A good leader is someone who gets those smart people in the room with them to help them do what they need to do.
Yeah.
So.
And that's another case for diversity of skill sets, diversity of thinking, neurodiversity. We talked about that with Beverly, that the value of people were not all the linear engineering type thinkers, and I'm a systems person.
Yeah, systems thinking is so
thinkers.
important in water and the environmental world for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also about not just developing your own skill sets and the team below you, but the fact that, especially in public utilities, or if you are an agency within a city government, you're reporting to someone else. You're reporting to a board. You're reporting to, and especially some of the things, the issues that would come up, whether it's Flint, Newark, Jackson. I've talked to some of the GMs who are like, that we needed to work on this infrastructure in Jackson, Mississippi. The board was from the white suburbs. And so you have to become that advocate. And you're just a manager. I mean, I might call the executive CEO or whatever, but you still answer to somebody else. If you work in the city government and they have a new mayor who thinks a certain way, that might affect what you can or can't do, what you can or can't talk about, what you can or can't get money for.
Right. That's very true. And how much you're willing to sort of go against the grain sometimes. And if it's a very political position, that's not always easy, but yeah.
Well, and the biggest example of that is, I saw a great sort of analysis of what led up to Flint, and a situation where the governor decided to get rid of the city appointed leaders of utilities, primarily in Black communities, including Flint, and install their own executives who didn't know things like, you don't put this water in those pipes, or very, very bad things happen. They fired all the engineers, they fired all the leaders, and the operators were trying to. I remember this like yesterday when I was at, it wasn't AMWA, it was it was kind of the predecessor to Water Week. It was the big utility leaders event in DC, And in Virginia, the head of EPA had gone to John. Well, I'm blanking on last names. I haven't had my coffee yet because I've been on interviews back in state this morning. The head of Boston Water, John Sullivan,
John Sullivan.
and told him, you need to go to Flint and you need to stay there for a month and you need to talk to every single person and find out what really happened. And he got up on stage and he told this room full of utilities what really happened. It's
You have a
exactly
good
that.
memory.
Got rid of all the leadership and the operators who knew these systems were trying to say, hey, don't do this. This is a bad thing to do. We put that water in these pipes. They haven't been primed. They have, and that's how we ended up with lead poisoning a whole generation of kids.
Yeah, we've gone to a lot of different, taking it all around different things of how, water and policy and women and I have a thought. What do you think about in your email asking me if I wanted to come, you talked to you asked about, there's the water pipeline and women in STEM, but I was talking to some of my women colleagues at AMWA before this of kind of their perspective and what their thoughts about different things, and so one of them said something interesting, and that I thought about, I think because of the systems way that we need to think about water, right, is that, women in STEM and how we can, there's a couple of things we can do, right? Make space for people who don't, I guess, make space for people or connect with women who are not in STEM, right? To it's kind of this multidisciplinary piece of things, or I think also bring in like the arts. That's happening a lot more, thinking about how to make water, people's connection to water and to their water utilities more important. So I think that's important. But then I think it's also important to remember also the people who just the diversity of what it means to be a woman, right? There's how people identify, gender equity, but also we come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's important. I think women, we have to stick together as women, because that's kind of my thought. It's important to just make space for others in the field, and I try to do that, and even in ways that I don't even know that I've done it. Like there have been women who've come up to me in my career, I've said, I just really want to talk to you, I've watched what you do from afar, I want to know this or that, I admire whatever, and they, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, Kat, where they look to you as a mentor and you don't even realize that they're watching. So I think that's really important.
Well, I think
I'm a parent,
reuse, right? And people like you, people like Pat, because in the policy space, that can be a really young space. And you get a lot of young women in there, and then it's all about power, right? I mean, it's not how many degrees you have, or how much power you have, and so, or how much influence you have, or how much you are connected with people who have power and influence, and how well you understand the system, right? And so, how have you seen things changing in terms of who's in charge of the regulatory agencies? To the extent you do the legislative sides, there's certainly been differences. And when I was an intern at Senator Lautenberg's office in '86, it did not look the way Congress looks today, right?
I can't speak to the legislative side, because our AMWA's chief advocacy officer, Dan Hartnett, knows so much of the ins and outs of a lot of the regulatory things that he doesn't necessarily need me to go up on the hill with him anymore. We've been working on lead and copper rule for so long that he knows it really well now, and other issues. But I mean, there's a lot of women in this office of water, right? From Radhika Fox to, a lot of her assistants and others who are appointed are women. I think of, Kathy Bailey, I think of Wendy Wilkes, I think of Karen Detmer, and, they all came from kind of the water policy side. And it's, I don't know, Jennifer McLean's running the Office of Groundwater Drinking Water. There are a lot of women at EPA. That's always been the case, at least as long as I've been around.
EPA's always had a few more women than, say, Interior or Corps of Engineers or, we were talking to Brenda Mallory's office. I'm still waiting for a call.
CEQ. Yeah, a lot of women at CEQ.
Yes. So, yeah, it was funny. When I went back for civil engineering, I said, I was going to go into water and environmental, and this old civil engineering professor was like, you women, you all want to do environmental.
Well, I did my degree in civil engineering also. And when I went to school, environmental engineering wasn't offered as an undergraduate degree. It is now at the University of Virginia. And I really wanted to do that. It's funny, but I think, women, that there's a lot of thinking of, in other cultures and countries, right? The women are the ones who have to get the water and things like that. Women are the water bearers, right? Water brings life. And I think that's part of kind of what it means to be a woman, right? And for those of us who are mothers, and I don't know, that just all makes a lot of sense to me in a way. Why women like environmental engineering. I mean, men too, but I think that is true, that at least my observation is there are a lot of women in environmental engineering. And when you see others like you, right, that makes you more likely to want to go into that field, right? I think of, my friends who are electrical engineers, and that was a lot harder. There were, in my civil engineering class, there were probably only maybe 15 or 20% of us were women. I don't know. There were like 5 of us out of 30. What's that percentage, right? But it was much less in the electrical engineering, right? It's like 2 or 3 out of 30, or 1, or, or a bigger class.
I ended up joining a engineering sorority at NC State, in part because I was trying to catch up and do all the engineering, the core engineering classes in one year, because I already had a geology degree at NC State, and was trying to get ready for the EIT and everything. And one way to do was instead of taking statics and dynamics separately, they had like this really super crammed half a semester of statics, half a semester of statics, primarily for electrical engineers who didn't really do as much for that. Okay. And it was 100 in the room, about 10 women, 8 of whom were sitting together. Those were the AOEs. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to be sitting out here by myself. I'm going to join that sorority. Like, the women need to, it helps when women can get together and have that support in many different ways. And recognize that we have different experiences. And I think one of the things that comes up, and this is one of the reasons I started the summit, is there was this woman who popped up at WEFTEC who announces that she's the be all and end all of gender equity. She has no water background at all. Some steel magnet family gave her like $250,000 to go running around to big conferences and say, we need gender equity. But the guy's already told her what study is supposed to say, which is we need to go get more girls and women into STEM fields. And we need to teach women how to meditate so they're not so angry. And that's good, and give them childcare and lactation rooms on site. And it's like, that's going to take care of everything. It's like, it's a lot more complicated to have a full, thriving career in the water space. And I said, Lord, you look at all the things that happened, we should say since Harvey Weinstein, and plus COVID and the additional stresses that women in the water space were feeling, and the disconnection, right? And so you already her 2.0 that Brianna Hoover had started, that had already started before COVID. But then you had the Women Water Nexus and ASCE, AWRI, and we are going to have AWRI speaking. women with an XN of water, which is a little mastermind that a woman in Tucson Water just started having and just inviting her friend. And since it's online, she's continuing to do it. So people from all over the world are able to come. It's not just women in Arizona anymore. And it's a great place to, like, women have, their parent gets dementia or their kids get sick and they're still trying to, deal with a, new staff. And then they've got young staff who have never been in the office and, trying to make sure they know how to communicate, not just ghost you if they haven't gotten things done, and all the little things that are a lot easier to teach people if you're actually there in the office. Not that we should get rid of work from home, but it's an adjustment to try to, like, how do you make sure that people are getting things done if you can't just knock on their door and say, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully we haven't had those problems at AMWA. Well, we worked really hard during COVID to keep things going, and all remotely. And I mean, people I find in our office anyway like going into the office. We go in, I go in 3 days a week. Usually we don't have to go in 5 days a week, but we have to be there 1 or 2 days a week. And people like being in, I think, just because we have a really good culture in our office where all of us like working with each other. We all are committed to water. That's a great thing about water, right? Is that people are, I think, who stay in the water business, particularly around utilities, but also in consulting and things, just this understanding that water drives society, right? Water drives communities, and water, maintains life. And I told you I had something, my person is coming now to the house, Cat. So I'm going to have to go in a minute and answer the door.
But one of the things that did come up was, in my last talk on, did you have the door coming back or? Okay.
My husband will get it.
Okay. So I was just on with the founder of iRelaunch, who is on the career reentry task force. And this is something I think a lot of, especially the C-suite folks that you deal with, that in the private sector, there's been a lot done in developing these return to work programs, but it hasn't happened in the public sector as much. And so SWE and iRelaunch and CDM Smith is the only utility consulting firm that has one of these reentry programs, is creating opportunities for people who've stepped away from their careers to come back in. So apparently there's 2 bills in Congress right now to do some studies on this and to develop some pilots of actually having some reentry programs in the public sector and in the water space. And there's so much money, there's so much work, and it's not just taking kids straight out of school who may have used the latest and greatest technology and models or whatever, but they haven't gotten on the ground experience. And so there's a lot of women like me who have the experience, who would love to get back in with a larger organization, but it's very hard to do when people think that you have to be a certain age at a certain level and all those certain things. So something definitely to watch, and hopefully you'll have a chance to watch some of the other sessions that we have where we're going to be talking about that a lot more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Kat. I know you got a lot of great people lined up, so best of luck to you in finishing this great project. And I can't wait to see some of the interviews. Thanks for having me.
For coming the same week. We're doing this recording the same week as AMWA's Water Policy, the biggest conference. And so, Erica usually has a bit more energy, and she's I'm so grateful that you're here at a week when I'm sure you're just ready to go to sleep. But it's great to have your support, and thank you everyone for watching us. And please do watch I hope all of the speakers get to watch each other as well, because we got some fascinating people in this group. So thank you so much for coming on back. Thank you, Erica, for being here. We'll see you.
Great. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.